I would say that friendship patterns vary through our lives. So actually, in our early lives, we make friends in different ways. Some of those friends stay friends for life. And with those friends, we go out and we enjoy the geography of the outdoors.
Hello there. My name is Kit Rackley. My pronouns are they, them, and this is Coffee and Geography. The aim of the show is to get to know, explore and celebrate the diverse and intersectional range of people on this rock we call home and their love and passions of it. We'll find out why guests identify as geographers, and if they don't exactly, we'll have fun exploring all the myriad of ways that connects their life to geography. So, pour your favourite brew, get cosy and listen in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at CoffeeJogPod. Off we go. Hello everybody, this is amazing, right? Because I'm going to introduce Mr. President himself, and that is Alan Parkinson. By the time you're listening to this, is President of the Geographical Association and a long-term friend of mine. Hello Alan, it's lovely to see you.
Good morning Kit, lovely to see you too.
So Alan is a geographer through and through, and if you know, most people listen to this are like, I wondered when Alan was going to come on this podcast. So a lot of you listeners probably know Alan already, but for those of you who don't, Alan is a geographer through and through, a Yorkshireman who spent more than half his life living in Norfolk and love its coastline and rolling countryside where he currently lives. A teacher and author with a house full of books, and Alan's wife is an art educator, and they have 2 kids, both completing degrees at the University of East Anglia. And Alan has been proud to work with the likes of Dan Raven Ellison. Crikey, how many shouts is he going to get on this thing? And he's proud to work with Dan Raven Ellison, Helen, Leigh and Tom Morgan-Jones to produce Mission Explore. We'll talk about that a bit later. And the award that he has received from the Royal Scottish Geographical Society for supporting fellow colleagues and the support of his fellow colleagues as well. Alan, that's you've achieved so much over your career. I don't really want to ask that question, like, what are you most proud of? It's probably like asking you to, I don't know, pick a favourite child or something. But
I suppose it's the things that you don't expect to happen, that you don't work towards. You just help other people, and at some point somebody puts in a suggestion that perhaps you're worthy of some sort of additional award. I know that, for example, when Margaret Roberts got her MBE in the New Year Honours, that was never something that she was aiming for. It was something that came out of the blue, and obviously she has supported so many colleagues, friends of mine who've trained with Margaret, and I guess that sense of an unwanted but very nice reward, I guess, for years and years, which it has been, of supporting colleagues, going back sort of over 20 years probably, of thinking, well, what I'm doing in the classroom might be of interest to others, and it might just save them a bit of time. It might also give them some ideas. Not that they have to think all of my ideas are fantastic. There's a little spark there which they can take in another direction. And I suppose it's similar to, I was listening to Mark Cavendish this morning, talking about how he'd managed his 34 stage wins, and he said it was because of the team. The team giving him the slipstream to sort of follow along. And we use the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants quite a lot. And of course, with my own work, I've learned myself from, the Noel Jenkins, the Tony Cassidys, the SLNers, all the sort of networks that we've worked with, both of us over those years, which have sort of informed our practice. And also, those friendships of people, virtual and real. And I'd just like to mention the passing of Judith Roberts.
Of course, yeah.
Earlier in the week, some months ago now when this goes out, but a fantastic virtual colleague to many.
Yeah, absolutely. Our thoughts go out to Steve and the family in that respect. Your sentiments are absolutely spot on, I think, Alan, because I just want to tell everybody kind of the way that we met and how it really helped me to become the geographer that I am. And that was the first time I met yourself was when my old boss, my old head of department, Nigel Parfitt, who I worked with, decided that while I was doing my PGC first placement at the school, that I should come along to a little dinner with some Norfolk folk. So Norfolk geography teachers, and there was yourself there. I can't remember. Do you remember where we went? It was me, you, Rob Lodge, Nigel.
I think it was possibly Barnum Broom.
Yeah, and it was just a lovely little. It was about, I don't know, it was about 15, 16 of us, I think. So it was not a massive crowd, and I was so nervous. So I was thinking, I'm looking around, and I'd known your name from textbooks and Rob Lodge and everything like that, and pretty overwhelmed. But I felt so quickly, felt like part of the family, part of the team. It was absolutely lovely, and just like learning through osmosis from people like yourself, like Rob Lodge and the likes, and yeah, you're right. Standing on the shoulders of giants, and people say to me, when they meet me at conferences, they say, "Oh, your kit. Oh, wow!" It's like I've just done, and like you get that feel. It's like, well, that's very nice, but I kind of like almost feel like it's about just reflected glory because of everything I've absorbed from everybody else. And I certainly wouldn't be the teacher or the geographer that I am today if it wasn't for all those people. And you're right, we are a community, we are a big team, and we could not do what we do without the support of others. And I think that's what this last year and a bit has taught us all, is that actually the pandemic has been such a tragedy and a hardship for many people. I mean, I don't want to dismiss that in any way, shape or form. So you've got to take any silver linings you can from these periods of tragedy. And one silver lining is I think it has brought a lot of us closer together because we've been quote unquote forced to do things virtually, and we've been able to do a lot more, like chats and just get-togethers and like the Wonder Room at the Geographical Association virtual conference was brilliant. And yeah, so I echo those sentiments exactly, Alan. And our name might be on resources or textbooks or stuff, but there is a team of people behind all that. We've got our drinks with us today. It's pretty warm here, so I'm on some detox cordial. But you've got an actual brew with you. So what's your brew today?
I do. So I'm on it's a Waitrose number 1, which is a posh range. It was on a special offer, so that's not so bad. And it's a Rwandan. I don't think it's a single estate, but it's drawn from a number of estates in Rwanda. Fair trade, of course, and it's very nice. It's not too strong. It's only a grade 2, so it's going down quite nicely. And I've got some orange juice as well.
That's the problem I've been finding with the research. So when I've been setting up the coffee and geography map for people to go and research where we source our coffee and teas from, is that the vast majority of all these are blends or they're combinations. So when you try and find out the source of things, it's so difficult. And then I might end up just putting a pin in Rwanda, but then people can then obviously go and find out what the Rwandan sector in terms of coffee.
I did a quick Google to see if I could. Because Soft and Waitrose will give you that further information, especially on things like eggs. You can work out from the code on the egg, but I haven't found that yet. But I'm guessing it will be from the particular coffee growing regions of Rwanda, which are actually quite extensive, I think, because a former colleague of mine worked in Rwanda for 3 years, and he was telling us quite a lot about that country, and in particular the Rwandan cycling team. We built a unit of work around the Rwandan cycling team, who's known as the land of 1,000 hills, and it provides perfect training for cyclists. And there's quite a lot about sport and the use of sport to bring people together after the genocide. And fascinating country.
I think that deserves its own movie. You got Cool Runnings from Jamaica.
There is actually a movie.
There is?
Yes, there is. About the Rwandan Olympic, the Rwandan cycling team, which competed, I believe, in the Olympics. There is a movie. And it's possibly even more realistic than Cool Runnings. Interestingly, my son's geography teacher, as it came towards Christmas, that was the film that they used to show. But they showed it every single year, so it's like, goodness, Cool Runnings coming out again. But, you got to love a bit of John Candy.
Yeah. Oh, awesome! Right, so I'll look that up, and I'll put a link in the description with regards to that movie, and then I'll have a little look up myself, because that'd be really, really interesting. And me, what I'll do when I watch that is not just about the sport, the cycling, the community, that, and I'm a complete subscriber to that. In a previous episode, I think it was episode 6, Stephen Swab and I talked about how football, for example, can generate community and the good that it can do. Obviously, at time of recording, we're only a few weeks out of from the end of the Euros, and we all know about the sorry scenes, that we saw with the behaviour of I wouldn't call them England fans, but then on the flip side of that, you hear so much about what good the England team have done with regards to raising awareness of racial issues and pride issues and things like that. So that Rwandan cycling team is going to be something I'm really, really interested to look up, because I think, as you say, coming out the back of a genocide and what it's done for that country in terms of their sense of identity and their sense of pride in themselves, and that's what sport can do. That leads us quite nicely onto our sense of place then. So, as you said, you are a Yorkshireman who has spent more than half your time living in Norfolk. So, you've got this interesting mix then, where I suppose it's fair to say that Yorkshire and Norfolk are fairly contrasting parts of the United Kingdom. So, Alan Parkinson of 2021, to what extent then are you a Norfolk, a Norfolk lad and a Yorkshire lad? So how has your identity been formed by these two places, or other places you have been and visited?
Yeah, so I've actually I've written about this before. There's a primary geography conference held at Charney Manor. It's been held there for about 20 years, and for the 20th anniversary, Simon Capling pulled together a sort of a book, a compendium of essays around geography, and I was asked to contribute. And it was my chapter was called "You Can Take the Boy Out of Yorkshire," and it really was about how your childhood really shapes who you are. So I think the fact that I grew up in Yorkshire means I will always be a Yorkshireman, rather than, although obviously I've lived, as I said, for more than 30 years in Norfolk now. I did spend most of my childhood in Wickersley. Actually, it's a village. It's probably the posh end of Rotherham. It's up on the hill above the smoke. And my dad was a steel worker down in the sort of Meadowhall and Parkgate and that sort of Templeborough. My other side of the family were coal miners, and actually my school I went to was a couple of miles from Maltby, where there's a deep coal mine, and a lot of the lads in my form at school, when they finished school, they went down the pit, and my granddad said, you're not going down the pit, you don't want to go down there. So geography was the subject that I really was the best at, actually, at school. I did other subjects, obviously, but it's one that I was drawn to. So growing up in that area, lots of woods, lots of freedom, lots of cycling, actually. Used to cycle a lot around Yorkshire. And then my parents used to take us into the Peak District. So a lot of the weekends we'd head into the peaks. And actually yesterday I met up with Richard Alloway, who's over in France. And we had a lovely walk around Laskildale and Mulgrave and the sort of southern peaks. And then to get back to Norfolk, I had to go, all sorts of lots of the places I remember having been as a child, Chatsworth and those sorts of places in the peaks, and then up through Chesterfield. And so I guess, I've lost my accent. There's a little bit less. But when I meet my brother and sister who are live up in York, they're very much strong Yorkshire accent, and the parents, strong Yorkshire accent. So there is that accent part of your identity, I think, shifts. And neither of my children, obviously have any sort of Yorkshire or in fact a Norfolk accent, because my wife is from Surrey. So they, I think, probably have quite a neutral sort of accent, but they live, the whole of their lives in Norfolk. I think that's that those early years, I think, in the same way as your childhood shapes so much about you, it also shapes your identity. And the other thing I miss is, I do miss the hills. I miss the changing gradient. Although, of course, Norfolk isn't flat, as we well know. And like in Norfolk, you suddenly realise it's not flat.
Yeah.
But every morning, of course, in term time, I drive over to Ely where it definitely is flat, the fenland landscape. And there's a great Stephen Fry quote, which is something like, any idiot can appreciate mountains, but it takes a person of subtlety to appreciate the fens, because there is so much about the fen landscape. A lot of it, of course, is the sky. The amazing, the fact that you can see the cathedral from so far away, and dominating the landscape. Whereas in Yorkshire, the landscape of my childhood, it's the pit heads, and it's taking the dad to work and seeing the blast furnaces and the amazing sort of smoke and flames as the steel was made, and the Sheffield canyons with the steelworks on the other side, and a lot of that has sort of disappeared. And I think a lot of cities have also lost some of that identity as well. Sheffield now has got modern buildings you find in lots of other cities. That sense of identity is being lost. So yeah, when I moved down to Norfolk in the sort of late 80s, really just looking for my first teaching job, really, that was what brought me down. And I'd never been to King's Lynn before, where I then spent 20 years. And I think I'd only been to Norfolk once before for a boating holiday on the Norfolk Broads. So I didn't actually know much about it, but then ended up living in Snetcham on the coast near Hunstanton. Fantastic bird reserves, the sort of high tide spectaculars they have there. And just loved that although that coastal strip all the way around, sort of Cromer, and then even down beyond that county head. But not quite go to Great Yarmouth, it's a bit like that Lion King quote, isn't it? What's that place? That where the shadow lies. Great Yarmouth. Great Yarmouth's lovely, and got a lot of actual money, hasn't it, to update this town centre, as has King's Lynn, of course, because King's Lynn, strong fishing community, taught a lot of the students from those fishing families in the north end of Lynn, and really interesting school that I taught at over there. And then latterly, as I said, in Ely. But I started teaching actually in Derbyshire and on the edge of Sheffield, where again you had the hills and you had the weeks of snow in the winter, and then very much different landscape. So it all feeds in, and I do love travelling. That has been afforded by Erasmus, involved in Erasmus, which of course is a sad casualty of Brexit, but that's allowed me to travel and work with European colleagues, and that's been an extra dimension over the last 10 years. Working with Cole Bonnet, and he's introduced me to this whole European community of teachers who are now sort of friends I've worked with for many years, and still involved with, but sadly, the Zoom meetings rather than a nice glass filled one in Palermo or strolling the streets of Berlin, as I missed out on that.
Yeah, but the Norfolk coast is something which I love, moving up here from Essex. And for those of you who don't know this part of the world at all, then the Norfolk coast is absolutely sublime in terms of its geography, its culture, everything from geographical processes to its history as well, with regards to, say, for example, the tragic flooding of 1953, for example, which really did literally shape that coastline. It's an amazing part of the world. And when you said about Big Sky, and you're absolutely right, it's a bit of a chuckle because I've got strong links to Montana, as you know, and they call that Big Sky. But of course, you've got vast mountains in the west, but then you've got what people may not know about Montana is actually the vast majority of it, especially the eastern side of Montana, is very, very open and undulating rather than mountainous, and the skies seem to go on forever. Awesome. Yeah, so you mentioned Erasmus. You're involved in that?
Yeah, so we currently have 4 Erasmus projects running in the school. I'm involved in 2 of those, and then we have one which is involving our Modern Foreign Language department. In an ideal world, it would involve student mobilities to La Réunion and France and other countries, but that's not been possible, obviously, this year. The other one is being coordinated by the head of ICT, and that's a similar project involving lots of Scandinavian countries, but the 2 I'm involved with, the first is called GI Pedagogy. It's about the pedagogy associated with geographical information systems. And what it's trying to do is come up with a model for best practice for how to teach about and with GIS. Very often the focus is on the resources and on the content, but not the best way to teach using GIS. And what we're doing is we're looking at Rosenshine's principles and adapting those for use with GIS. So we've done a research review. We've published that research review already, and that's on our website. And at the moment, we're now working on trialling some resources and also putting together a teacher training course. We're actually hoping to have a first face-to-face meeting in October. Normally, we would have been to a number of European countries by now. Now, the second project that I'm involved with is the D3 project. The D3 project means developing digital data literacy. Those are the 3 Ds, developing digital data literacy. And that has involved us in, once again, a literature review. Once again, it's about resources. And once again, it's about a teacher training course. This time round, the focus is on the everyday experiences of young people and how they use data, but how they also generate data so that their mobile devices constantly recording their location, for example. And that sort of data can be used and collected and collated to give an idea of movement, an idea of patterns. So already, for example, in urban spaces, as soon as you step out of your house, your image is being captured by cameras, your phone is tracking your movements, your purchases are recorded. That's sometimes helpful if we're trying to track down a person who's gone missing. That sort of data, those images are really helpful. But it's also potentially affecting your privacy. And it's whether that can be harnessed in a positive way. So the project about D3 is looking at the everyday encounters with data, enabling young people to see that whenever they're living their lives as they are now, they need to be mindful that that data is being collected, but also be aware of how it can be helpful for them. So we're presenting some ideas and collecting ideas from that data set, which is being shared locally, nationally, internationally, and then taking that into the classroom.
I was overlooked for Erasmus because, I was told actually, it's okay, Kit, there'll be another time when we can do it. There'll be another time when we can do it because it's, we always thought it would always be there, would always be a part of this. And it's just goes to show how much things can change, rapidly in politics and geopolitics. And it's just, it's such a sad thing. And I'm waiting with bated breath to see what the Turing project how that will cater.
Now, the government would say that the Turing scheme replaces Erasmus, but it doesn't. It's nowhere near as effective in terms of the payments it offers, in terms of the facilitation of exchange, which is what Erasmus is all about, really. And that's one of the great things that was lost when Erasmus was lost during Brexit process. Not just for me personally. I mean, I've gained a huge amount from it over the last 10, 12 years involvement in Erasmus. But for young people, along with freedom of movement, loss of Erasmus has taken away a chance to meet with other young people in Europe.
I think we're living through a very, very interesting, in quotes, period of history at the moment. And yeah, this lack of cultural exchange, it just reinforces the isolationism. It reinforces mistrust, misunderstanding, a lack of acceptance of other cultures. Because we can only look inward, we can't look outward anymore. So it's a testing time. It's a testing time I think we're in right now. And I think us as educators have got a really, really key part to play here. Maybe we can't hold back the tide, but what we most certainly can do is make sure that there are enough floating life rafts available that we rise with it so we're still around when the tide recedes again. I mean, that's probably the best analogy I can use, really.
So for me, it's very difficult to separate teaching geography from politics. Geography is politics. When we're talking about issues such as climate change, obviously we are delving into areas which politicians would perhaps like us to stay clear from. Quite often I'm going to be using statements from politicians as starters, or to get young people that I'm working with thinking about, what exactly are they saying here? What do they mean? Why are they saying this? Why have they decided to act in this way? Now, one of the key areas, obviously, geography involves itself in is climate change. And I remember back in 2004-05 when An Inconvenient Truth came out, that actually the guidance was that teachers should not just show this film as being something that was happening, that climate change was real and it was happening, but actually that we had to give that balanced approach. We had to say that there were people who had an opposing view. And that came out of a court case, actually. Somebody who tried to prevent the film being used in schools. And one of the outcomes of that court case was that the guidance had to be used and teachers had to present the film in a particular way. Now, obviously, there are other issues which teachers have been prevented from talking about in the past. Homosexuality, of course, for a while. And it's important, I think, that as a teacher, you're obviously mindful of what you're saying. There's a safeguarding aspect to anything that you might say. And obviously also there's currently the Prevent legislation, which partly is about visitors to the school rather than full-time staff. But clearly there's an expectation that we remain as neutral as we can be within the classroom and not espouse particular views.
As someone who does climate change education, work with climate scientists, someone who's a member of the LGBT community, we do not set out to be political. We set out to be truthful, factful, and live our genuine lives and portray the truth. It's those who push back or create the debate around these facts, around these truths, which then bring the politics into it. So we're then forced to be political because that's the only game we can play. That's the only game that's brought to the table. I know so many colleagues as climate scientists and whatnot who do not want to be political, but unfortunately they don't get anywhere unless they play that game, and it's a shame.
In fact, there was sort of an outcry recently, wasn't there, when the BBC Bite Size and SQA actually had statements which essentially were providing a balanced view, that there were some really good things to come out of climate change, when the reality is for most of the world's population, particularly obviously the countries that have had the least to do with producing the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases over the years, that they're going to be terribly affected. That brings with it, of course, the importance of adding a hopeful note, and I've certainly been interested in the work of David Alcock and others in the field of hopeful education.
You've been, you are, as I say, time of this going out, you are GA president of Geographical Association president, so which is amazing. Well deserved, Alan. Long time coming, in my opinion. But you've been doing a project about previous GA presidents. So was it a blog or something you've been doing about GA presidents of past? So, but instead of you kind of like telling us a few examples of maybe I wouldn't say your favourite GA presidents, but kind of the most intriguing, interesting GA presidents, let's kind of flip this round. So we're going to do jog your memory. But instead of me giving you a situation where we got to talk about when that took place, you're going to flip this round and say, actually, I'm going to look in the past at these GA presidents, and I'm going to tell you some really cool facts and tidbits about some of them. But what do you have for us?
Okay, so the Geographical Association. Now, the Geographical Association is the subject association for geography educators. We have members from around the world, but a lot of our activity takes place in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland in particular. And what we have as our mission is to further the understanding of geography, and also to support geography educators, to enable them to work with young people, to really explore geography in the most positive way, and also to develop themselves, to develop their practice by doing that. And we've been in existence since 1893, and actually the first meeting of the association, when it was founded, took place at Christ Church College in Oxford, when a group of public school masters, as they were mostly at the very beginning of the GA, although we involved female members immediately, that actually they explored how they could share lantern slides. Now, lantern slides were the sort of PowerPoint of the day, the latest technology, imagery on glass slides, which actually are very good quality images, and that were used in a classroom setting or a lecture setting by having a light projected through them to display the image really large on the wall. And teachers, lecturers would then talk to those images in the same way as we'd have a PowerPoint slide perhaps to guide a lesson now. Now, these were expensive to produce, and they needed some sort of interpretation with them, some lesson resources. And so very early on, what happened was that the GA and its early members began to share those slides, to produce them or reproduce them, so they were more than one copy of particular slides, and also to sell or loan the slides to members. And very quickly that turned into an organisation which attracted members. They paid a fee. It was run by volunteers at the time, rather than the paid staff who now work for the association. Now, as the membership grew, it was decided that there needed to be a president. And so the association didn't have a president to begin with, but once the presidency was established, the first president, Douglas Freshfield, he served for 13 years. And during that time, the association was growing dramatically, and it was seen as being something that was really important, that teachers had an association to turn to. Richard Doherty, who's a former GA president, he described it at the time as a lantern slide cooperative. So it was partly this focus on resources to begin with. But eventually a journal was produced, the Geographical Teacher, the first issue published in 1901. And then from then, after Freshfield, the pattern was established of a president once every year. So there would be a president for a year, and during that year the president would give a lecture, and they would also involve themselves in raising the profile of the association. And so to begin with, many of those early presidents weren't always geographers really. They were people who had a public profile, which meant that they could be brought in and then they would share the value of the GA. So we had some interesting people early on, including Hilaire Belloc, the author, Sir Halford Mackinder, of course, fairly notorious with some of the incidents that he got involved with. He was president just after the First World War, rather. We also had, during the Second World War, a couple of presidents who were in post for 3 years to give stability during the war. But other than that, we've seen that annual pattern establish. Eventually, towards the 60s, 70s, 80s, we had a few more female presidents. We also moved away from a pattern of academic geographers and lords, one of whom won the Nobel Prize for Peace, for example, knighted people, MPs, people with influence, people high up in society, towards, as I said, teacher educators, and the occasional teacher too, mostly secondary school teachers, some retired head teachers, some HMI, some early HMI, for example, people who'd worked abroad as well, in the colonies, administrators, in the railways, in museums, historians, classicists. So the presidents are an interesting bunch, and I've spent the last 2.5 years researching a biography of each of the GA presidents, and also sharing stories that have emerged during my research. Now, that can be found on a blog. It's gapresidents.blogspot.com. I'm sure you'll put the link separately on the web page, Kit. And along with that, what I've tried to do is share the story of the association. So there's around 600 posts on the blog. I've also written about it in the GA magazine, and there's going to be an article in the Roots journal in January. There's a special 2022 issue about teacher research. So rather than student research, which it normally is, this one's about teacher research. So I'm obviously really, really proud that I'm going to be the president of the association. It's really significant that a teacher is once again president after quite some time, nearly 20 years since Peter Fox, the last teacher president. And actually, Peter is the only state school president, the only president to be an acting state school teacher. So that would be fantastic if we could, for the next president after me and after Alistair Owens, who comes after me, that perhaps we have somebody from a more diverse group, somebody that hasn't been represented before as the president of the association. And I think it's really important that as we look forward, the association continues to develop its work to support teachers at a time when clearly geography is more important than ever.
Lovely that this podcast is in the spirit of what you're trying to achieve there. It's something that's really close to my heart because I think we can link everybody in this world together through geography in one way, shape, or form. And we're going to come to an end now, Alan. So we're going to do our final thing, and we're going to do We Are All Geographers. So this is where, as I just mentioned, we connect all of our guests together by using a string of words that guests have to try and link to geography. And last week, I spoke to Sebastian Sterl, who works in the climate science sector and does a lot of fantastic work with renewables out in Africa and sub-Saharan and West Africa in particular. And when I asked him what word he would like to give you to challenge, he came up with quite a nice one, which actually is going to link quite nicely with what we've been talking about today, and that's friendship. So he would like you, in 30 seconds, Alan, to talk about the word friendship in a geographical way, in as much as you like, and I'll start the timer as soon as you start.
Okay, friendship. So the first thing to say, friendship is intergenerational, so it goes across the demographic profile. At the GA, we actually developed a project looking at intergenerational walks and conversations that would be had on those walks. Friendship also can occur anywhere. You can have friends in any part of the world now. I'd consider lots of people social media to be my friends, even if I've never physically met them. And also, I would say that friendship patterns vary through our lives. So actually, in our early lives, we make friends in different ways. Some of those friends stay friends for life. And with those friends, we go out and we enjoy the geography of the outdoors.
Fantastic. That was lovely, Alan. So now you've got the chance to do the same for our next guest. So is there a particular word? And it could be abstract, it could be concrete, it could be literal, it could be whatever you want, so that they can try and have a go at linking to geography.
Yeah, so my presidential theme for the year is everyday geography. And that could be geographies of the everyday. So I'm thinking about everyday experiences that people have, commuting to work, engaging with social media, those sorts of things, but also things that happen every day. Eating, drinking, buying a newspaper, those sorts of quotidian experiences, really. So I would probably go for everyday.
Every day. Nice.
So every day is a single word, but it could be every day. But we'll go for every day.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That works fine. All right, fantastic. So, Alan, you're known quite well to a lot of people, but for those of coming across you for the first time, how can they connect with you? So, what kind of modes? You can obviously give your Living Geography blog a shout out as well. So, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, of course. So, so probably Living Geography is one way of doing that. That's livinggeography.blogspot.com. That's been around for nearly 15 years, and it has 10,500 posts on it. So the other thing I would say is, if it's something you're developing, use the search function. If it's happened in the last 15 years, it's on Living Geography. Some years ago, I submitted an application for an Innovative Geography Teaching Award that the RGS run. And I came up with a punning title, which was GeoBlogs. Now, GeoBlogs is the person in the street, but GeoBlogs has become my online sort of persona, I guess. So I've had a number of blogs around GeoBlogs, but my Twitter feed is at GeoBlogs, so GeoBlogs. And I also have a departmental feed, which is King's Ely Geog. That's my school department feed. I also run quite a few other Twitter feeds as well, but I won't mention those, including what I call Twalter egos, which are fictional people who exist on Twitter that are me. And so I have a pensioner living on the East Yorkshire coast whose house has been threatened by coastal erosion. I've been running that account for 10 years now. He's been engaged with by lots of people who, although it says in the profile, this is not real, but the idea is it's a long-term example of a case study, and I feed in news about coastal erosion, which affects his life. So that's GeoBlogs on Twitter, Kingsley Geog, and the Living Geography.
Nice.
Again, there's 10 other blogs that I run, but you can link to most of those from Living Geography. And please get in touch. You can comment on a blog post. You can send me a message. You will have to request to follow me on Twitter. It's a private account. across all the platforms except for TikTok.
We'll try and get you on there at some point. Yeah. But finally, Alan, is there anybody you want to say hi to?
I guess all the geography community. We mentioned Mission Explore earlier, but Mission Explore colleagues. Who I'm hoping to meet up with Dan at least over the summer.
Yeah, Dan, Helen, and Tom. Yeah.
Yeah. So Helen is now living in Portland, Oregon, and Tom's up in Edinburgh. So we're a bit in different locations, but who knows? We might get together again. It's another one of the books that we did some years ago. For those who don't know, worth looking out for them. You can find them on online bookstores, although you might want to spend your money on a shop that's not going to just waste it on blasting into space. And it was a great. One of the independent bookshops posted a fantastic tweet this morning, which I won't say. Not super word, but it was basically saying, buy some books from us, and we won't just blast it.
Be sending it off to space.
Yeah. So
that's a good point.
So that's and of course the family, Sally and Sam, and the broader community of geographers, which of course is everybody. Everybody's a geographer, even if they don't realise it.
Of course. Yeah, and good luck to your young'uns with their studies at the UEA, so with everything that's going on. So, right, Alan, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, and no doubt we will converse again in a very, very short time. But thank you for sharing your wisdom, your thoughts, and your wonderful stories with the rest of the geography community. Thank you.
Thanks, Kit.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at coffeegeogpod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandgeog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.